For the fifth consecutive year, the silence in my house during the holidays was a physical presence, a heavy blanket of absence that no amount of cheerful holiday music could pierce. It wasn't just being alone. It was the deliberate nature of the exclusion that carved out a hollow space in my chest. This year, however, the final blow came not in the form of a non-invitation, but through the innocent, confused voice of my 8-year-old grandson, Leo. His small face, so earnest and concerned, filled the screen of my iPad. "Nana," he asked, his forehead wrinkled in genuine confusion, "why aren't you coming for Christmas again this year?" "Dad said you're busy." The word "again" was a tiny, sharp dagger. Behind him, I could see the familiar backdrop of my son Mark's living room. It was only December 1st, but holiday decorations were already adorning every surface. A glittering tree in the corner, garland draped over the mantelpiece, a tangible testament to plans long in the making, from which I was conspicuously absent. A cold, heavy stone settled in my stomach. Before I could formulate a gentle response for him, the screen jostled. A hand entered the frame, and my daughter-in-law Chloe's perfectly made-up face replaced Leo's. "Leo, sweetie, you know you're not supposed to use the iPad without asking," she scolded, then noticed me. "Oh, Eleanor, sorry about that. He's just going through a boundary testing phase." "Victoria," I said, my voice deceptively light, a skill honed over 62 years and a 39-year career managing university students. "I was just asking Leo about Christmas." "It seems you're hosting." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, we're still finalizing details. Nothing is set in stone yet." "I see," I replied, my face a pleasant mask of neutrality. "Well, when you do finalize things, please let me know. I'd love to see the grandchildren." "Of course," she said, her tone dismissive. "I should go." "Leo needs to finish his homework. Say goodbye to Grandma, Leo." I heard his muffled, "Bye, Nana," before the screen went dark. Sitting alone in the too-quiet house that David and I had shared for 40 years, I stared at the blank screen for several long moments. This was the fifth Christmas in a row. 5 years since David's heart had given out unexpectedly, leaving me anchorless in a sea of family that had slowly drifted away. 5 years of increasingly transparent excuses. "We're keeping it small this year, Mom. The kids have been exposed to something at school. We don't want to risk getting you sick." "Oh, didn't Mark tell you? We changed plans at the last minute." I looked around the living room, at the walls that had once echoed with the laughter and bickering of 3 children, the frantic wrapping of presents, the rich aroma of holiday meals I'd spent days preparing. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to a life that was no longer mine, each piece of furniture a relic of a past I could no longer access. At that moment, something deep inside me, something that had been bending, accommodating, and quietly breaking for 5 lonely years, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud break, but a profound and decisive one, like the final thread of a rope giving way. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my determined face in the dim room. I navigated to my banking portal. The balance still startled me sometimes. David had been a brilliant, methodical financial planner, investing steadily throughout our marriage. Then there was the family inheritance from my side, which he had managed with a shrewdness that had multiplied it substantially. Our children had no idea. We had deliberately chosen a modest life, prioritizing education, travel, and experiences over flashy possessions. They saw a retired teacher living in the family home, and they assumed the teacher's pension was my sole source of income. They thought I needed their financial help, a belief that made their neglect somehow even more galling. They didn't neglect me because they thought I was poor. They neglected me despite thinking I was poor. My finger hovered over the trackpad for only a second before I clicked over to a real estate website. For months, I'd been idly browsing mountain properties, a form of digital escapism, a way to imagine a life with a different view. But suddenly, it wasn't a daydream anymore. It was a blueprint. 3 hours later, I had scheduled a viewing for a property I'd admired online for weeks. A stunning, contemporary mountain home with panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows and complete privacy on 3 wooded acres. It was listed at $1.4 million, a figure I knew would render my children speechless. The realtor, Brenda, a woman with a perfectly coiffed bob and a skeptical smile, seemed dubious when I arrived alone the next day. "This property is quite a substantial investment," she said carefully, her eyes subtly assessing my sensible walking shoes and simple, well-worn wool coat. "I'm not most buyers," I replied simply, my voice leaving no room for further discussion. As we toured the house, a feeling of profound rightness settled in my chest, a sensation I hadn't experienced since before David died. The soaring windows framed the majestic, snow-dusted mountains beyond, like living works of art. A massive stone fireplace promised cozy evenings, and the gourmet kitchen whispered of complicated recipes and dinner parties I could finally host on my own terms. "There's a top-of-the-line security system already installed," Brenda mentioned as we walked through the primary suite. "The previous owners were very security conscious. Cameras, motion sensors, the works." I nodded, already picturing myself here. Safe, independent, and utterly in control. "I'll take it," I said. Brenda blinked. "Don't you want to think it over? Perhaps discuss it with your family?" "I've been thinking it over for months," I said truthfully, "and my family's not involved in my financial decisions." 2 weeks later, I signed the final paperwork, the smooth glide of the pen feeling like the signing of a Declaration of Independence. The process had moved with breathtaking speed, thanks to my ability to make a substantial cash offer. As I drove up the winding, pine-lined road to what was now my mountain retreat, the first true snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the landscape in a soft, silent blanket. Inside, I walked from room to room, running my hands along the cool granite countertops and the smooth wooden window frames. They belonged to me alone. There were no memories here, no ghosts, no disappointed expectations. It was a blank canvas. I activated the security system immediately, downloading the app that would allow me to monitor my new domain from anywhere in the world. Then I called the one person who had remained a constant through everything. "Arthur, it's Clara," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty, expansive room. "I've done something either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." He laughed, a warm, familiar sound that traveled easily through the phone line. "It's about damn time, Clara. I'll be there this weekend to help you get settled. We'll review all the paperwork and make sure everything's in order." As I ended the call, I stood at the great wall of windows, watching the snow blanket the mountains in a scene of pristine, silent beauty. For the first time in 5 years, I was genuinely looking forward to Christmas. A Christmas that would be entirely my own. The first week passed in a blissful blur of deliveries and decisions. I had brought only personal items, books, photographs, my mother's silver, from the old house, choosing to furnish this new space entirely from scratch. Each purchase felt like a declaration of my identity. A sleek, low-slung, sectional sofa in a deep charcoal gray, a minimalist dining table that seated 8, a king-size bed with an adjustable base that prioritized my comfort alone. I was shedding the skin of my old life, the one that accommodated David's preference for traditional, heavy furniture and kept the children's outdated bedrooms pristine for visits that never happened. "You're nesting," Arthur observed on Friday evening, arriving with an overnight bag and a bottle of expensive champagne, his salt and pepper hair dusted with snowflakes. "Is that what this is?" I laughed, accepting the bottle. "I thought I was having a late-life crisis." "A crisis involves poor decision-making," he said, gesturing around the open-concept living area with its breathtaking twilight view. "This is possibly the most sensible thing you've done in years." After dinner, a boeuf bourguignon I'd always wanted to try but never had because Mark claimed to hate mushrooms. Arthur helped me work through the practicalities. We discussed updating my will, changing my official residence, and notifying various institutions of my new address. "What about the old house?" he asked, refilling our wine glasses. "I'm putting it on the market after the holidays," I admitted. "There's nothing keeping me there anymore." A flash of concern crossed his face. "Have you told your children about any of this?" "Not yet," I confessed, tracing the rim of my glass. "They haven't called. Not even to discuss the Christmas plans that apparently don't include me." Arthur's expression darkened. He'd witnessed my increasing isolation over the past 5 years, had seen how my children's visits became perfunctory, their invitations to family gatherings scarce, all while they made condescending comments about my modest lifestyle and gently suggested I look into senior living communities. The next morning brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. I was arranging a stack of books on the new built-in shelves when the security system chimed softly. On the monitor, I saw a man in his late 30s, his broad shoulders dusted with snow, a sheriff's department beanie pulled low over his ears. He carried a woven basket and was looking directly at the doorbell camera. "Good morning," his voice came through the speaker, clear and calm. "I'm Jake Miller, your neighbor from down the ridge. Thought I'd welcome you to the mountain." I hesitated only briefly before responding via the intercom. "That's very kind. I'll be right there." Jake Miller stood a good 6 inches taller than my 5-foot 5-inch frame, with the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. Despite his imposing build, his smile was easy and genuine as he handed me the basket. "Homemade sourdough, some local honey, and a bottle of whiskey that won't let you down," he explained. "Mountain essentials." "That's incredibly thoughtful," I said, genuinely touched. "Would you like to come in for a coffee?" I just made a fresh pot. Over steaming mugs at my kitchen island, I learned that Jake was a sheriff's deputy, currently on extended medical leave recovering from a shoulder injury sustained during a difficult arrest. He lived year-round in a modest cabin about half a mile down the mountain road. "Not many full-timers up here this high," he noted, glancing appreciatively around the house. "Most of these places are vacation homes for city folks who rarely bother to introduce themselves." "I'm planning to live here permanently," I explained, the words feeling more right each time I said them. "I recently retired from teaching." "On your own?" he asked, then immediately backtracked. "Sorry, that's none of my business." "It's fine," I assured him. "Yes, I'm on my own. My husband passed away 5 years ago, and my children, well, they have their own lives." It was the simplified, polite version of a much more complicated and painful reality. Jake nodded, seeming to understand the subtext. "Well, mountain neighbors look out for each other. I'm just down the road if you ever need anything." He scribbled his number on a notepad on the counter. "Cell service can be spotty during big storms, but I've got a landline that never fails. I'm usually home these days while this shoulder heals." After he left, I stood at the window, watching him navigate the snowy path back to the road with a confident, steady gait. There was something deeply reassuring about knowing someone like him was nearby, someone who had chosen this same solitude but remained open to human connection. The peaceful rhythm of my new life was shattered on December 18th. My phone rang, and Mark's name flashed on the screen, the first direct contact from any of my children since I'd moved. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice carrying that familiar note of forced patience. "Where have you been?" "I've tried calling the house twice this week." "Hello, Mark. I've been at home." "No, you haven't," he replied, a hint of frustration creeping in. "I drove by yesterday. The house was dark. Your car wasn't in the driveway, so he'd been checking up on me. Not out of concern, I suspected, but to confirm my solitary status, to assuage any latent guilt about their planned exclusion." "I've moved," I said simply, a beat of stunned silence. "Moved? Moved where? You didn't say anything about moving." "I wasn't aware I needed permission," I replied, the words coming out sharper than I'd intended, years of suppressed hurt finding a voice. "Of course you don't need permission," he backpedaled quickly. "It's just, this is sudden. Where are you living now? Some senior community." The assumption, so condescending, stung. "No, Mark. I've bought a house in the mountains." "You've what?" His shock would have been comical under different circumstances. "Mom, how could you possibly afford your pension, the maintenance on a mountain property, the isolation?" He seemed to be processing this out loud, recalibrating his entire understanding of my circumstances in real time. "Your father and I were always good with money," I replied, deliberately vague. "I'm perfectly comfortable, thank you. Now, was there something specific you were calling about?" Another pause. Actually, yes. We've been trying to finalize Christmas plans. Sarah and Ben are bringing the kids to our house for Christmas Eve. Then we're all thinking of taking a little holiday trip someplace with snow for the children. There it was, the perfect, gaping opening. Yet the habit of 5 years was too strong. He still wasn't inviting me. That sounds lovely, I said, my voice even. I hope you all enjoy yourselves. Well, he cleared his throat. You'll be all right on your own for the holidays? I'm planning my own Christmas this year, I said truthfully. Something special. After ending the call, I sat in my favorite chair, watching the snowflakes dance and swirl outside the windows. A deep sense of unease settling over me. The conversation felt less like a check-in and more like reconnaissance. Michael confirming I had no expectations before they finalized their plans. My suspicions were confirmed 2 days later. The security system alerted me to a vehicle approaching. Through the kitchen window, I recognized Mark's black SUV crawling tentatively up my driveway, moving slowly as if the driver was unsure of the destination. The vehicle stopped. Mark emerged, staring up at the house with an expression of pure, unadulterated disbelief. He pulled out his phone and snapped several pictures before getting back in his car and driving away without ever approaching the door. I called Arthur immediately. He didn't even knock, I explained, watching the replay on the security feed. Just took pictures and left. That's concerning, Clara, Arthur said, his lawyer's caution evident. How did he even find your address? I'm not sure. I haven't shared it with any of them. The property records wouldn't be updated this quickly, would they? Unlikely, he replied. Could he have followed you at some point? Or perhaps the real estate agent mentioned something to someone. He promised to check if the property transfer had been recorded publicly yet. I tried to dismiss my unease, but that night, I found myself double-checking every door and window before bed. The next morning brought a flurry of texts from all three of my children, the most communication I'd received from them in months. From Mark, Mom, we need to talk about this house situation. Call me ASAP. From Sarah, since when do you have money for a vacation home? We need to discuss this as a family. From Ben, are you sure this purchase is a good idea at your age? Living alone in the mountains seems risky. I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on my own Christmas preparations, driving into town for groceries and final touches for the small dinner I had planned for Christmas Eve. It would be just myself, Arthur, and Jake, who had mentioned having no family nearby. When I returned home that afternoon, my arms laden with packages and bags of food, something felt immediately, viscerally wrong. The security panel showed a steady green light, no alerts. But a subtle difference in the arrangement of the entryway bench, a decorative throw pillow was a few inches out of place, caught my attention, setting off a quiet alarm in my mind. I set down my bags, my heart beginning to thud a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app, reviewing the footage from the past few hours. At 2:17 p.m., a car I recognized as Sarah's silver crossover had pulled into my driveway. The high-definition exterior camera captured her and Ben approaching my front door, their body language furtive, their heads swiveling as they looked around the secluded property. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out what appeared to be a key. My breath hitched. I watched, my blood running cold as she inserted the key, turned it, and pushed the door open. They let themselves into my home. My home. The interior cameras provided a damning, high-resolution panorama of their invasion. I fast-forwarded, my hands trembling with a mixture of violation and rage, as they wandered through every room. They opened closets, examined my new furniture, peered at the price tags I hadn't yet removed from a few smaller items. Their commentary was picked up with crystal clarity by the microphones. This place must have cost at least $1 million, Sarah said, her voice filled with a kind of avaricious awe as she ran her hand along the smooth surface of my kitchen island. Where the hell did she get that kind of money? Dad must have had investments we didn't know about, Ben replied, his tone matter of fact. He walked to my refrigerator, opened it without a second thought, and helped himself to a bottle of sparkling water. She certainly couldn't afford this on a teacher's pension. Did you see the view? This location is prime real estate. Think about the family gatherings we could host here, Sarah mused, walking towards the great room. So much better than her old, musty house. Mark's already making plans. We're all coming up for Christmas. Surprise her, he says. She laughed, a light, airy sound that felt like a violation in itself, as if the decision to commandeer my life was somehow still hers to make. I watched, my jaw clenched tight, as they discussed which bedrooms their families would use, as they planned where to put their Christmas tree in my living room. Before leaving, after a 40-minute tour of my private sanctuary, Sarah placed something on the kitchen counter, a spare key, which she pointed to while saying something to Ben about making sure everyone has access. I checked the front door. It was locked. They had relocked it behind them. If I hadn't had the cameras, if I hadn't noticed that misplaced pillow, I might never have known they had been inside. Fighting a rising tide of panic and white-hot anger, I called Arthur. Then I called Jake. Within 30 minutes, both men were in my kitchen, Jake still in his uniform from an earlier shift. They had a key, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, as I showed them the footage on the tablet. Samantha used a key to enter your house without permission, Arthur said, his face grim. The only way they could have a key is if someone from the real estate transaction provided it, which would be highly unethical, possibly illegal. Jake studied the security footage with a professional, detached focus. This is textbook trespassing, he confirmed. Having a key doesn't grant legal permission to enter someone's home without their knowledge or consent. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the cool granite of the kitchen island. They're planning to come here for Christmas. All of them. Mark said they're going to surprise me. Do you want to change the locks? Jake asked practically. I want them to understand they can't just invade my life whenever it suits them, I replied, a lifetime of accommodating finally giving way to a clean, sharp, righteous anger. I want them to face consequences for once. Arthur and Jake exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. What did you have in mind? Arthur asked carefully. I want to be prepared when they arrive, I said, my resolve solidifying with every word. Not caught off guard, not emotional, not vulnerable. I want to meet them from a position of power. Jake nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. The element of surprise should be yours, not theirs. Exactly. I paced the length of the kitchen, ideas forming rapidly. They think they're surprising a lonely old woman who will be pathetically grateful for their presence. But we'll be waiting for them. The question is, what exactly do I want to happen when they show up? Arthur leaned against the counter, his legal mind already working. We should consider the practical aspects first. When do you think they'll arrive? Christmas Eve seems most likely, I reasoned, based on Sarah's comments about Michael's plans. That gives us 3 days to prepare, Jake said, his tactical training evident. First priority is securing the property. I'd recommend changing the locks immediately. I agree, Arthur added. We should also find out how they obtained that key in the first place. The next morning I called Brenda, my real estate agent, and explained the situation as diplomatically as possible. Mrs. Evans, I'm absolutely horrified, she responded, genuine distress in her voice. I can assure you, no one from our agency would provide keys to anyone without your explicit authorization. Yet somehow my daughter had a key to my house, I replied, keeping my tone measured. A house whose address I haven't shared with any of my children? After promising to investigate immediately, Brenda called back within the hour. I've discovered what happened, she said, her voice tight with professional embarrassment. Your son, Mark, contacted our office last week. He claimed to be helping you move, said you were having some mobility issues, and had asked him to coordinate some deliveries for you here. The calculated nature of the deception made my stomach turn. And someone believed this without verifying it with me? One of our new administrative assistants, Brenda admitted. Yes, she provided a key to him, thinking she was being helpful. I've already initiated disciplinary proceedings. This is a serious breach of protocol, and I am so very sorry. By that afternoon, a locksmith had changed every external lock on the house. Jake helped me upgrade the security system to include instant alerts for any attempted use of the now invalid keys. Arthur, meanwhile, had drawn up a formal statement of understanding, not a legally binding contract in the traditional sense, but a powerful, clear articulation of boundaries and expectations for going forward. "You're sure you want to take such a hard line?" Arthur asked as we reviewed the document. "Once you establish certain legal boundaries, it may be difficult to return to a more casual family relationship." I considered his words carefully, looking out at the mountains that had become my sanctuary. "I'm not doing this to punish them, Arthur. I'm doing it to establish clear boundaries. For too long, they've treated me as an accessory to their lives, someone to be included or excluded at their convenience. That ends now." Jake arrived that evening with takeout from the local Thai place, and the three of us held an impromptu strategy session over pad Thai and green curry. "As a law enforcement officer," Jake offered, "my perspective is this. Based on the security footage, they clearly entered without permission, which constitutes criminal trespass in this state. However, they could claim they believe they had implicit permission since Mark obtained the key through seemingly legitimate means." "So what are our options?" I asked, picking at my food. "Several approaches," Jake said thoughtfully. "The most confrontational would be to report the trespass officially, which could result in criminal charges. Less severe would be to simply prevent their entry when they arrive and inform them they're not welcome without an invitation." Arthur raised a third possibility. "Or," he said, "you could allow them in on your terms. Let them arrive thinking they're surprising you, only to find you fully prepared and in control of the situation. It's a psychological approach rather than a purely legal one." Jake nodded. "Potentially very effective. It shifts the power dynamic completely." The idea resonated with me deeply. After years of being dismissed and marginalized, there was a profound appeal to turning the tables so decisively. "I like that option," I decided. "Let them come thinking I'll be pathetically grateful, only to discover I've built a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for their attention." We spent the next hour outlining a detailed plan for Christmas Eve. Arthur would arrive early, providing legal backup and moral support. Jake would be present in his official capacity as a deputy sheriff, his uniform a clear, unignorable symbol of authority. And I would be ready, calm and composed, to reclaim my narrative completely. "There's one more thing," I said as our planning concluded. "I need to know exactly what they're expecting, which means I need to contact the one person who won't lie to me." The next morning, I called my grandson Leo under the pretext of asking what he wanted for Christmas. "We're coming to see you," he blurted out excitedly before I could even broach the subject. "Dad says we're all going to your new house for Christmas. It's supposed to be a surprise, but I already know." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone light and cheerful. "Did your dad say when you're all coming?" "Christmas Eve," he announced. "We're bringing all our presents and staying for 3 whole days. Mom says your new house has lots of bedrooms for everyone. Dad says it's the perfect place for our family Christmas tradition. He's bringing the special eggnog that grown-ups drink. And Aunt Sarah is already planning where to put the Christmas tree. Uncle Ben says there's probably a hot tub." Each word from his innocent mouth was a fresh revelation of their staggering presumption. They weren't just planning to visit. They were planning to fully appropriate my home, to impose their traditions and their presence in my space without a single consideration for my wishes, my plans, or my autonomy. After ending the call with Leo, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. The sheer, breathtaking completeness of their entitlement was finally fully clear. They hadn't just excluded me from their Christmas plans for 5 years. They now intended to descend upon and commandeer my private retreat for their own convenience. That evening, when Jake stopped by to install an additional hidden camera at the main entrance, I shared what I'd learned from Leo. "They're planning to stay for 3 days," I explained, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "They've already decided where to put their tree, which rooms they'll use, everything. Not a single one of them has actually asked if they're welcome here." Jake's expression darkened. "This goes beyond presumptuous, Clara. They're treating your home as if it's community property. Exactly, I said, handing him a mug of tea. Which means our Christmas Eve reception needs to be absolutely clear. This is my home, my life, my choice who enters and who doesn't. Are you prepared for the potential fallout? He asked gently. Family confrontations around the holidays can leave lasting damage. I gazed out at the snow-covered mountains, their enduring silent strength a reminder of my own. The damage has already been done, Jake. For 5 years, they've shown me exactly where I stand in their lives. All I'm doing now is showing them where they stand in mine. Christmas Eve morning dawned clear and bitterly cold, the sunlight glittering across untouched snow like a million scattered diamonds. I woke early, a mixture of steely determination and nervous energy propelling me through my morning routine. Today, everything would change. It would either be the beginning of a new, more honest relationship with my children, or the final, stark acknowledgement that those relationships had been irreparably damaged by years of neglect. I had spent the previous day transforming the house into exactly the Christmas environment I wanted. No concessions to my children's loud, chaotic preferences. No accommodations for grandchildren I rarely saw. Instead, I decorated with elegant, intentional simplicity. White lights woven through fresh pine garlands on the mantelpiece. A small, tasteful tree adorned only with the antique glass ornaments my mother had left me. Sophisticated table settings for three, myself, Arthur, and Jake, for our Christmas Eve dinner. The guest rooms remained conspicuously untouched. No extra towels laid out, no beds turned down, no special accommodations for unexpected visitors. Every single aspect of the house made one unambiguous statement. This is my home, arranged for my pleasure, not a hotel awaiting your arrival. At 9 a.m., Arthur called to confirm his plans. I'll arrive around 2, he said. That gives us plenty of time to review everything before your children's expected arrival. Perfect, I replied. Jake is coming at 3 to help with the final security preparations. How are you feeling, Clara? His voice softened with concern. I considered the question, looking out at the pristine, sun-drenched landscape. Remarkably calm, I said. For the first time in years, I feel completely in control of my own life. After ending the call, I checked my appearance in the full-length mirror. I'd chosen my outfit with deliberate care. Not the comfortable but shapeless sweaters and slacks my children were accustomed to seeing me in, but a well-tailored emerald green dress that highlighted my still trim figure, paired with the single strand of pearls David had given me on our 30th anniversary. My silver hair was freshly styled in a modern, angular cut that framed my face, and I'd taken extra care with my makeup, emphasizing my eyes. The woman looking back at me didn't resemble anyone's fading, forgettable grandmother. She looked confident, sophisticated, and very much in command of her circumstances. Jake arrived precisely at 3, dressed in his full deputy's uniform rather than the casual flannels and jeans I'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. The official appearance was intentional. We'd agreed his presence should communicate authority, not merely friendship. The roads are clear, he reported, stamping snow from his boots in the entryway. No traffic issues that might delay their arrival. Good, I said. Everything needs to proceed on our timeline, not theirs. We spent the next hour doing a final review of the security system. Jake had positioned additional cameras to capture the entire driveway approach and every possible entrance to the house. All feeds were now displayed on multiple devices: the main monitoring station in my office, Jake's department-issued tablet, and my phone, ensuring we'd have comprehensive, real-time awareness of my family's arrival and movements. Remember, Jake said as we finished the check, you're in control here. This is your house, your rules, your boundaries. Don't let them flip the script. I won't, I promised, feeling a surge of gratitude for his steady, calm presence. When Arthur arrived at 3:30, bringing a bottle of expensive champagne for celebrating afterward, the 3 of us conducted a final walkthrough. Every detail was perfect, from the elegant holiday decorations to the tantalizing aroma of the beef Wellington slowly cooking in the oven. A sophisticated Christmas Eve dinner for 3. The table settings are a particularly nice touch, Arthur observed, nodding toward the dining room. That's precisely the point, I agreed. I've moved on. I've created my own traditions. They need to understand I'm no longer waiting by the phone for their attention. At 4:15, Jake's tablet chimed with a soft alert. Vehicle approaching, he announced, showing us the feed from the driveway camera. Mark's black SUV led the procession, followed by Sarah's crossover and Ben's sporty sedan. I counted heads as they parked. All three of my children, their spouses, and my 5 grandchildren, ranging from Leo's 8 years to Sarah's daughter Zoe, now a thoughtful 15-year-old, 10 people, arriving completely unannounced, with luggage and wrapped gifts, expecting food, lodging, and entertainment in a house prepared for 3. "Are you ready?" Arthur asked quietly, standing beside me at the window as we watched them begin to unload. "Completely," I assured him, though my heart had begun to race. Jake positioned himself discreetly in the kitchen, visible enough to be noticed, but not immediately confrontational. We watched on the monitor as Sarah, clutching her key, approached the front door. Her first attempt to insert it failed. She tried again, jiggling it. Confusion crossed her face as she realized the locks had been changed. After a brief hushed consultation with Mark, she finally pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed formally through the house. I smoothed my dress, took a deep, centering breath, and moved to answer it with deliberate, unhurried steps. "Surprise!" multiple voices chorused as I opened the door. Their faces, arranged in expressions of exaggerated excitement, faltered and then fell completely when they registered my appearance. Elegant, composed, and clearly not surprised in the least. "Hello," I said pleasantly, making no move to step aside and allow entry. "This is unexpected." Mark recovered first, his salesman's smile snapping back into place, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Merry Christmas, Mom. We thought we'd surprise you with a real family holiday at your new place." He gestured expansively at the assembled group. "Everyone's here." "So I see," I replied, my body still blocking the doorway. "How thoughtful of you to decide how I should spend Christmas in my own home." An uncomfortable silence descended, thick and heavy. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, shifted her weight awkwardly. The younger grandchildren looked up at their parents, confused by the tension. Ben's wife checked her watch impatiently. "Mom," Sarah said with a nervous, tinkling laugh, "it's freezing out here. Can we please come in?" "That depends," I said, my voice calm and level. "Did any of you consider calling to ask if I was available to host 10 people for Christmas? Or whether I had plans of my own?" Ben stepped forward, employing the cajoling tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. "Come on, Mom. We wanted to surprise you. You're always saying you want to see more of the grandkids." "A surprise visit is dropping by for coffee, Ben," I said, my gaze steady on him. "Not arriving with luggage for a 3-day stay without an invitation." Mark's expression darkened, his patience visibly thinning. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. It's Christmas. Family should be together." "I agree completely," I said, "which is why it's so interesting that this is the first Christmas in 5 years that any of you have wanted to include me in your plans. Coincidentally, it happens to be the first Christmas after I purchased a rather desirable mountain property." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Leo's small, puzzled voice. "Daddy, you said Nana would be happy to see us." The genuine confusion in his voice nearly broke my resolve. But I reminded myself this wasn't about punishing my grandchildren. It was about establishing boundaries their parents had trampled for years. "I am always happy to see you, Leo," I said gently, my voice softening just for him. "But right now, I need to speak with your parents about some adult matters." I finally stepped aside. "Why don't you all come inside where it's warm, and we'll sort this out." They filed into the foyer, their festive mood utterly evaporated, and immediately froze as their eyes landed on Jake, standing silently in his uniform in the kitchen doorway. Mark stopped mid-stride, his face paling. "Mom, why is there a deputy sheriff in your house?" "This is Deputy Miller," I said, closing the front door firmly behind my bewildered family. "He's here because I have concerns about an unauthorized entry into my home." "Unauthorized entry?" Sarah's voice rose in confused alarm. "What are you talking about?" "Perhaps we should all move to the living room," I suggested calmly, Children, there's hot chocolate and cookies set out in the kitchen if you'd like some. Chloe hesitantly began shepherding the younger grandchildren toward the kitchen, while 15-year-old Zoe and 13-year-old Jacob lingered, clearly intrigued by the unfolding adult drama. Arthur stepped forward from where he'd been observing near the fireplace. "I'm Arthur Lowell," he introduced himself with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Evans's attorney." "Attorney?" Mark's face flushed a deep red. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I gestured toward the seating area. "Please sit down. We have matters to discuss before we determine whether this surprise visit of yours can proceed." They complied reluctantly, exchanging alarmed glances as they arranged themselves on the sofas, facing the crackling fire. I remained standing, a deliberate choice to maintain the position of authority in my own home. 2 days,